Okay, so as you saw, my computer was dying, but we're back. So the ideas that we have, the way that we interpret what's being depicted on stage is always evolving. It's always in flux. How you might see something on stage tomorrow might be different because of events that happened yesterday or the day before. After, like, for instance, a production with the right image before 2015, before, gay marriage was legal in the United States, might play very differently than it would today. Or particularly if there was a production that week, right? So you have to be sensitive toward what are the hot button issues, what are things that people care about, and how am I commenting on and shaping the world in which I'm living. But that also ties back into well, let me visit this for another second. But that ties into concept. So again, concept should be highlighting, something that is existing in the play, but is also connecting to people in a new way, or in a way that makes them understand the material better. So for instance, this production might be even just based on the lighting, right? We see a celebration. This isn't a censure of behavior. This is, a celebration of love, as opposed to another director. And what's awesome is people may develop these ideas differently based on their personal experiences, based on their research, based on their connection to the material. Someone else might read Romeo and Juliet and say, hey, these are hormonal teenagers. Why are we depicting this as love, romantic love? So what is a group that I can, maybe highlight in this and show that they're insipid, and, say that they're not prepared for this? And maybe that Romeo and Juliet is constantly on TikTok or something, right? But in a way that may connect to, but those choices have a huge impact on how an audience interprets them and sees what the director vision is, even though the text doesn't physically change. So that's a huge part of how the director has a say-so over what that message is. Similarly with casting, and we will, use some of this for examples, but certainly ties in with appropriateness in terms of, again, and this has evolved in recent years too, of like there used to not be an expectation that actors would be cast racially appropriately, right? Or the gender that is appropriate to the character, or the age that is appropriate. And what's interesting is, in some ways, we are experimenting more in terms of what appropriate means. And it's just, again, it's in flux. So, for instance, there could be a flashback, of a character, and do they have to be the same race if we say outright that it is X character for us to understand? In the past, people may not accept that in a way that they might be more ready to today. And also sometimes it's a little bit more simplistic. Is this character said to be a Goliath type figure? Is this character said to be a pipsqueak? Well, those may have, physical impacts on casting and who that looks like in terms of, again, that appropriateness. Talent is also, of course, important. That one's very simple because it relates to the first thing, as we know from our acting background and what we will continue to learn about acting, is that the first and foremost is that we want out of an actor, no matter the scale, is truthfulness. So that gives evaluation of their skill. But sometimes talent can also mean, well, can they memorize their lines? There's a talent component to that. Can they perform a particular stunt? Can they sing? So there are other talent aspects too that may make someone more attractive for a role. Experience is sometimes important, as your book states. So it may be relevant. I mean, frequently, everyone started somewhere, of course, but if your entire background is in Shakespeare, are you going to be the best selection for, a body comedy? Or if someone has a strictly film background, are they going to have the vocal and physical instrument to perform verse work well, or anything on stage? Can they physically fill, a theater space? It's a very different demand than someone who's mic'd and can not really support their breath. Growth potential is, I think as a director, this one's the most important to me, that do I trust that someone, because, this process of rehearsal tends to be about a month, so it's not a very long time, but is this someone who not only can grow in their craft, but who is going to be a good collaborator? Can they take notes? Are they going to be excited to come to work? So frequently that one I weigh much more than talent itself. And finally, relationship to cast. This one is also vitally important. Sometimes it's just about how are these personalities going to come together. And sometimes it's more personal. Again, bringing up Game of Thrones, there were 2 actors on Game of Thrones who had a dating history that was very tumultuous, and both demanded that they never be in the same room together. And so their characters never had scenes together, though it very much would have made sense for them to, and they had to shoot around each of them and find excuses to excuse some of them. So the relationship to cast is really important for success for a project as well. So that was all preparation. So that just means, before I even technically start, before I get in a rehearsal room, I need to do my script analysis. I need to cast the show. There all of these things. I need to have design meetings and start talking to the design staff to get the ball rolling, so we can make it to opening night. Because while the actors are rehearsing, everyone else is doing their jobs. Once they're cast, then the costumers can start building and pulling clothes, garments for them. Frequently the set and props designers, they can start early, but sometimes it depends on who you cast. So there's a lot that has to be done before the actual production part sets in. So for this, and this is really important it's only 3, but I think important to hit on. Staging arguably is the thing that sets theatrical directors apart most from cinematic directors, I think, in a really exciting way, because they get to block the actors. So technically cinematic directors do this too, but not nearly to the same degree. So blocking just refers to, as we know from our text reading, just movement on stage. That's distinct from stage business. Stage business is, I need to wash my hands, I need to dial the phone, things like that you innately, the actor can fill in themselves or with, minimal support from the director. Blocking, though, is about those bodies in space in relation to one another. We're going to look at a few examples of this, but that is where the keen eye and, again, the skill set element comes in. How do I know that I am telling the best and most effective story that I can based on how bodies are organized in space together? And that's how you create stage pictures in focus, because yes, the set designer gave you a wonderful space, a playground, if you will, to work on, but you have to fill that with physical action and placement that makes the most sense. So we're going to look at a few examples. So first, I want to look at this painting of Homer deified. So Homer being the epic poet. And I bring up a painting example because, and the reason why, again, the distinction in cinematic and theatrical directing is that theater directors, because of the, in most instances, like right when we look at the proscenium stage or picture frame stage, it literally, as we said, it looks like a picture frame. Therefore, you as the director are looking at action on the stage as though it is the composition of a painting or canvas. So you're actually using the same basic principles that a painter is. You need to understand how to create, again, stage pictures or effective compositions that tell story best. And to tell story, we look at focus. Because of the amazing craftsmanship that went into this painting, I immediately look at Homer being deified. Now that goes into most, not all, most of the people in this painting are looking at him. He is in an elevated space. There's an angel crowning him. So there's also plenty happening with color and light and line. All of these things that are even just the elevation of the heads that's also mirrored by the building, right? That help bring our focus to this point. But similarly on stage, I need to be aware of how these bodies are not just arranged however actors feel like, but how can I show who has the greatest status in this moment? How can I elevate them? How can I make sure focus is on the character that I need it to be on, especially if I want to create a diversion or distraction from the audience members? So however you tell story, it's still going to be grounded in these same principles. So for instance, just looking at a quick example of a production of Waiting for Lefty. So here, which is a show about sort of the Communist Party in America in the 30s, but really about striking. So taxi cab drivers who are going on a strike for the first time, wanting a union, and how their employers try to suppress them from being able to unionize. And that's why you see the red of, the ideas of communism. But even in these two images, even though we have mostly we have the same materials on stage. So obviously the pieces are mobile based on the placement that we see in both of them. But the scenic designer and costume designer, yes, they did their jobs, but the director is the one who decided how are these bodies going to be arranged. So even something that seems nominal, like arrangement, make a huge difference. So in the first image on the left, for instance, we see a point of insurrection, right? Because everyone is focused on, again, an elevated character. He's hunched over. There's physical tension within him. Everyone's looking up at him. Again, it's almost deifying him, actually. And also we have some actors in the front with their back to the audience. So again, we see how lauded these ideals are that he's talking about. There's more tension there than look at how relaxed in the second image, that because of this semicircle where, yes, we still have a shared focus. We know where we should be looking. It's still centered. The one is someone who's the first one, he's rallying people, right? He's trying to lead them, versus in this second image, this is a humble man of the people. He's trying to speak out, and yes, he has the floor, but we see the relaxed body language. He is not trying to elevate himself above them. He's just trying to get attention. And so there's more a sense of sharing and equality there. So it's really, even just the contrast of how bodies are arranged in space. I mean, that's one of the biggest components of what directing is. Hugely, hugely important. And I wanted to sort of end on a blocking script then. So that blocking, a director has to think about all of it. And this is also from your iBook if you want some more information on it. But they need to think about, okay, well, when are these moves going to happen? If two people walk together, how is that different than if they walk separately? What if they walk at different speeds? All of those things are things that your director's thinking about and that they mark in their script. So we see the script analysis. That's one of the first things they did, of course. And then based out of the script analysis, okay, how can I make composition of blocking choices that support that action? How can they do stage business that support the storytelling of the play provided? So, and we see that shown in, just arrows that are drawn. You see the characters are labeled in a certain way, and everyone sort of can adapt their own shorthand, but they have it completely laid out in the texts you see here, and a lot, myself included, like to have a physical layout of what the production designer has given for the ground plan of, okay, well, how are these bodies arranged? How far away are they from the audience? Are they in the foreground, background, and midground? How far apart or close are they together? What are the levels between them? All sorts of things that tell a different story to the audience. And what's fascinating is at the end of that entire process that the ending for the director is the beginning for everyone else. So once people are finally seeing the product of your show, that's when your process is over as a director. It, functions on its own after that point. And it sort of goes back to Anne Bogart's whole point about your job is not about creating product. It's about creating opportunities for things to happen. You are no longer relevant to the production when there are no more creative choices to be made. If the collaboration's over, then, you don't need a director. So the point of the director isn't to create a beautiful finished product as much as it is to make sure that we're facilitating creative decision making. So that process ends on opening night. And then the director frequently, they fly back home and start on the next project. But that's when it ends, and that is the role of the director.